Okay, so a quick heads up to all the panelists and the coordinators that are joining in here. So this panel discussion is going to be organized in the form of a podcast mode. So we'd be streaming it live on YouTube, and whoever participant, if you want to share the link, like if you want to share the link to anyone, any viewer, you can directly do it over YouTube. And I just head over to the chat and share the YouTube link. It is already set up. So you started the live stream already, and yeah, we are cool to go now. Shinwanti, you can go on. Am I audible, Shinwanti? Hello, Shanawaz, am I audible?
Yes, I think.
Okay, I think Shinwanti is
just.
Shinwanti is either muted or.
Just to check, is Gargiti here?
Yeah, hi Shinwanti, I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell them, Shinwanti, could you check if all of the panelists are being made the co-hosts, or if anyone is left? I think Suman sir hasn't yet connected his audio. So should we inform him in that case? Like, you could call him up before, I guess.
I have left a message for him on WhatsApp. Gargiti, we can start.
Okay, sure. Have all the panelists joined in? Could you just confirm that with me once? Shinwanti, can you confirm if Prakash sir is here or not?
Yes, I think
Yes.
1001 wants to
Okay.
Prakash.
Sure, I think then we are good to go. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel. Yeah, I'm extremely sorry for the interruption. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion of E-Summit 2021. We are very happy to have these esteemed panelists here, and I can't wait to hear their insights because each one of them have individually been amazing, have achieved amazing feats in their respective fields, and having them discuss important topics here today is going to be one of the most enriching sessions that we are going to have in E-Summit. And as we always propagate that E-Summit is a place where we discuss ideas and also find out ways of how to implement it. I feel this is the best way where we can actually express and evaluate these ideas. And so it is my esteemed pleasure to have all of these panelists and welcome sirs and ma'ams. We can't wait to hear your insights. So I hope that it leads to a very insightful and great evening. Over to you, Shinwanti.
We would love to organize this event in our campus itself, but due to the pandemic and lockdown, we were unable to do so. So here's a virtual tour of our university, the Jadavpur University campus.
I'm waking up, I'm feeling in my bones to make my system grow. Welcome to the new age, welcome to the new
We welcome all our panelists to today's session. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 5th session of InspiraTalks E-Summit 21. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our lives in unprecedented manner, compelling us to adapt to the digital mode of life. It has also impacted the economy, education, industry growth, and all other imaginable walks of life. Schools and colleges have moved online. Demand, supply trends have witnessed changes. Tourism industry has crashed badly. Jobs have been lost. On the other hand, the pandemic has boosted the digital infrastructure in our country to some extent. But work from home is the new normal and has encouraged by companies to optimize utilization of resources. Today, we have gathered here to discuss how COVID-19 has impacted our lives in every possible way.
At the helm of affairs, we have our moderator for the event, Dr. Shumon Mukherjee, currently the Director General of Bhavanipur Education Society College. He has 46 years of experience in teaching and research, management consulting, business training, and has been a professor at B schools of India and abroad. Fellow AIMA, Environmental Fellow USAEP, former director at ENY India, consultant to NCAER. He is a highly respected alumnus of St. Xavier's College, Kolkata and Jadavpur University, and is an authority on economics, name any section of it. He has authored several articles and academic papers, including the textbook of economic development, besides organizing multiple conferences spanning his 46-year career.
Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. To begin with, we have Dr. Amitabh Sarkar. Dr. Sarkar is a food scientist with demonstrated history of working in the food production industry for 24 years. Skilled in food operation, new product development, factory management, strategic planning, business strategy, and project management. He is an alumnus of Jadavpur University with Masters and PhD in chemistry. He is also an alumnus of IIM Calcutta.
Our next panelist for the event, Anvesha Bhattacharya, is an experienced consultant clinical psychologist with a demonstrated history of working in the hospital and healthcare industry, as well as in the field of academics as a teaching and training professional. Currently a teaching associate at the Nyotia University, she holds multiple degrees in clinical psychology from prestigious institutes like the University of Calcutta. She is highly passionate about teaching and training professionals to develop their skill and also in treating clients to alleviate their psychological distress. She has been a speaker in various webinars, workshops, and conferences over the last few years.
Next, we have Mr. Kaustav Mitra. He is the co-founder of Paradigm.io. He is also an alumnus of Jadavpur University Civil Engineering Department, Indian Institute of Science, and London Business School. From being an aerospace engineer, a Python developer, a product manager for the A380 wing flaps, customer analytics in FX brokerage, market entry strategy in prop tech, biz development in VR, algo development for derivatives at Goldman Sachs, to running product insights, growth, marketing, and sales strategy across fintech and asset management. He has done it all.
We are also exalted to have as a panelist Nabila Jamshed, a United Nations specialist, public speaker, and the author of the fantasy novel Wish Upon a Time, the legendary scimitar. She has delivered 9 TEDx talks and is a former UN peacekeeper, WMD disarmament professional. She is also an alumnus of the University of Oxford and Jadavpur University. Being a humanitarian, she has been an active part of various peacekeeping operations.
Last but not the least, we have Mr. Prakash Sharma, who is the co-founder of 1001 Stories, a Bangalore-based multidisciplinary consultancy focusing primarily on customer insights and behavioral solutions. He is an engineer from NIT Jaipur and an MBA from IIM Bangalore, and is a fanatical advocate of using behavioral sciences to solve problems for society, brand, and organizations. Now, we would request Dr. Mukherjee to take the proceedings of the session.
Well, good evening. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good.
Yes, sir.
Good. Good evening. It's always a pleasure to get back to Jadavpur University, which has been my alma mater, and which in Latin translates as loving mother. So going back to motherland, going back to the mother is always a joyful experience for any alumni. And I'm delighted to be with you on this very, very important show. Please note that today's topic is extremely important because we are not just discussing the involvement of entrepreneurship, but we are also discussing a very important element of what happens in face of COVID-19. Weiji is a Chinese word which actually has two connotations. It stands for danger or endanger, if you like. And as it changes, opportunities grow. So John F. Kennedy said, the Chinese have this word called crisis, which has two components. One is that of danger, the other is opportunity. I think we are facing a situation which is critical in nature, which is a crisis of sorts, where millions have lost jobs and lives, where scenarios are changing fast and very fluidly. And yet, to our surprise, we have countries making hay and some people making a lot of money. In that context, we would like to ask the panelists to dwell on how do you see the future? They're more than wearing the spectacles or looking through a microscope. It's very important to have an eyesight. So eyesight precedes the spectacles, that I would say. So let's look into the future. And I would like to use this as a kaleidoscope because I'm going to turn to each speaker and ask them to speak for some time. We will begin by giving them about 5 minutes each, because there'll be a lot of points that we will hit at one another, and then I'll ask them to get back to it. But as I lay the ground for discussion today, there are quite a few issues that come to my mind. Firstly, when we talk about how do we, from the point of view of youth, look into the future, we would first look at the scalar aspect, the scale. Where is it that majority of the people, particularly in India, draw their livelihood from? It is perhaps agriculture. More than 54% stays there. So the initiatives to be taken would largely be on that area. But two other areas which are grossly neglected over time, unless the Rio conference really highlights that. The last one, 2012, did highlight that, the importance of the blue economy. So one of the opportunities for this vast coastline of more than 7,000 kilometers, where millions of people draw their livelihood, we have some of the poorest living there, and yet the greatest resources are there in the ocean. So how would you distinguish between the green economy, the orange economy, the ocean economy, and the blue economy? And how do we look at the opportunities in light of the present crisis there? Agriculture, allied services, that's obviously going to be an important plank. And as we go through this trauma, and we are already going through blended learning, we are having online education. We are having examinations where we are not able to evaluate students well. And there is a charge that some are resorting to unfair practices so the better students grip that this is not a system which fairly evaluates. On the other hand, we would say that even if you came first, what you do with your life is what's going to be more important than what are the degrees you picked up. It's actually the learning that helps. So we can look at human consciousness, and we have with us a person who dabbles with psychology, Ornesha Bhattacharya. I'd like to ask her that in this way, where we are looking at human consciousness, where the cognitive, the evaluative, and the affective are intimately involved, how do we pick up learning? What would be the psychological state that youth need to have to face this world? We have this world of entrepreneurship. I told you about the blue economy, and I'm sure Mr. Kausav Mitra would be working on that. We have also the context of the international world. And we are deeply into self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we've forgotten self-sufficiency. How do we raise the resources? And we must remember that a large part of our resources come from foreign exchange. So where do we earn that very critical element which we call foreign exchange if we are just going the MSME way? Or is there a way out? And therein lies another thought, very modern thought today, called the circular economy, where we start with cycle, and I'll go back to that later. Recycle, recycle, reuse, repair, refurbish, recycle, and again, use resources. So minimize waste. How do we minimize waste? How do we use energy? And most importantly, and that's a point we cannot forget, is how do we look at the world tomorrow? We cannot be consuming everything that we have in this glorious world to make the youth of today poorer tomorrow. How are we going to reap the benefits of the demographic dividend? India having the largest youth population to actually ride this crisis, surf it, if you like. And therefore, the question of sustainable economy, sustainability, circular economy comes in. I think I've laid a few more. I would like to throw a few more pebbles into, but I've already done a numerous job of saying the discussion can go on to the wee hours of the morning if we actually deliberate on this. So where do we go from here? A question that Lewis Carroll asked the Cheshire Cat. And the reply was, it all depends on where you want to go. And Alice replied, I'm not sure where I want to go. And the cat replied, it doesn't matter then. So do we have a direction? Do we have a vision? There is a vision India has, and I'd like to share that. But does that vision match with that of the youth? Are we at ease with the vision that we have? The international aspect, the social aspect, how inclusive are we getting? The political aspect, the economic aspect, the scale aspect, the environmental aspect, the blue economy, the orange economy, the green economy, the silver economy, the white economy. Where do we go from here? I've almost laid the rainbows open. And to walk into the sunshine and the rainbow, let me call upon these distinguished panelists. I would call Mr. Amitav Sarkar, because he's in food and I started with agriculture, to be the first panelist, to say if 54% of our population is there, but we are still not producing enough. We already have political action against the farm laws, and we know if there is LPG in industry and that's taking us places, the rightful question is to ask is, why don't we want LPG in agriculture? And what are the opportunities for youth? Where is the entrepreneurial activities coming in? If ITC can be where ITC is because it's rural, how do you look at the future? Is it for self-subsistence, or is it going to be the plank which will help us take the country forward? Mr. Sarkar, this is your stage.
Sir, good evening, and thank you for calling me here to speak. Good evening, distinguished speakers, and good evening, students, and all the viewers. I hope I am audible. Could somebody say
Yeah,
yes?
you are okay. I can hear you.
Okay, okay. So the silver lining, this is a dangerous thing that came in our life, and it was like a bolt from the blue. We were never prepared for anything, even in our dreams. And in 2020 early stages like February and March, I remember we were thinking whether along with the standstill that is happening in other countries, what will happen to our countries, and in India, especially in the industry, the wages are low, the jobs are really, I would say, a high necessity for most of families to survive. So if we shut down, then what happens? How are these workers and the laborers going to survive? And the question was not only about the lower level, it was also with respect to the management also, that how do we manage this? And then initially we also shut down for about 5 days, and that was the first lockdown. Lockdown is something that came to our life for the first time, and thereafter we turned back and we opened it on the 6th day and arranged. There was no vehicle for transport, and we took the company's cars and our own cars and picked up our workers. And I, being in a food industry, we always follow sanitation, and masks are normal for us. So that was nothing new for us. Only thing is we had to ensure that we'll be now wearing masks outside. Earlier we used to wear masks only inside. And then slowly we turned back. And from one shift we went to double shift, and production reached first 100%. And the opportunity that came was production went to 125%. That was very strange. It may look strange, but food and essentials did very good business for the last 1.5 years. And none of the factories are closed. And the opportunity that came to us was, I would say, we thought more about doing our R&D. We thought doing more about sourcing from the country itself. There are many ingredients which we import, and the resource planning had to be rearranged. And slowly we saw that if we put in our hard work, we can make it in India. And that I think the lesson that COVID taught us was we can be self-reliant also. We can reduce our imports, and unlike other industries, the R&D which came to a standstill almost in other automobile and other industries where the necessity was not there because the sales had dropped and the R&D opportunities came to a grinding halt. But in food and agri, our R&D efforts increased more because we were thinking now of shifting to locally available raw materials and converting them into finished goods with an extended shelf life. And this showed us that it can be done. We also focused on minimization of waste, which was very important at that point of time, because 100% 100-gram wastage, cumulative can add on to 10 kgs of wastage. And because we didn't know when the supply chain would be normal again, so at any point of time, our main idea was whatever we have, maximize the use and optimize the resource that you have in hand. The green shoots that we can see now, I think the food industry and the pharma industry initially reap, those benefits. Now almost all the industries have understood that to be self-reliant is more important than depending on the others to give us the technology or the machines. Machinery part, I can say that earlier in around 2018-19, whenever we thought about making a new product or installing a new line, we always thought about looking at European manufacturers and taking them as a benchmark. However, last 2 years has taught us that there is no point. One is you will get, you cannot start in time. Two, getting your own products done in India, there are different methods. Only thing is we were lazy. I would admit that we were lazy and we tried to get everything ready on the plate. Now this pandemic showed us that we can do it ourselves, and giving a little push and an impetus. I think from here, whenever we are trying to set up a new line, we will think more about make in India processes and make in India machineries, not only to cut costs, but also to ensure that the supply chain is not broken down at any point of time. The hardships posed on the migrant workers, that was something that we also saw. But in our industry, basically, because it is 2 shifts or 3 shifts, we generally employ locally. So that is something I never faced. But looking at and talking to my friends in other industries, I understood that this is a very dangerous pattern. So the only option that I can think is a rationalization of wages across all the states. I don't know why this doesn't happen. So the pay scale in Mumbai and the pay scale in West Bengal, Kolkata, are widely different. And only when you can't get enough, then only you migrate. Otherwise, there is no compulsion for migration. One is creation of jobs, and the second is only if there is a balance in wages. That is something I have been seeing for all the last 25 years, that the balance of wages is very slowly, the tide is turning. And after this, I think, pandemic, one thing you will surely see in about 5 to 10 years is that rationalization of wages. And this also applies to the students also. The entry level, I would say the opportunities for the students from campus interviews and other things, for institutes and universities in Kolkata and West Bengal are limited, and the cities offered are always low. Whereas the CTCs and the initial primary start salaries in North India and West India are much higher. But I think there is a shift in that, and students are now getting better offers only because we have started thinking locally. We are not encouraging people to come for an interview all the way from Chandigarh and then taking a higher salary because he's earning more there. So we are trying to get in resources from the local area. This is, I think, the greatest opportunity and gift that COVID has given us, that we are no longer thinking of importing manpower also. This is a very bad trend in India, that I would say that movement of migrant workers is forced on the migrant workers. One is lack of job at a certain location, and the other is the pay skills variance from one part of the country to another part is really sometimes alarming. Students had a very difficult time. One thing of caution for the students is that your R&D has taken a hit. You have not done your practicals. You are doing online classes, and industry knows that. So, when the question of comparison comes between two people, it will be slightly difficult for you. And my advice to students is get back to the university, force them to open it as fast as possible. Do not wait. Do not wait. Get back to the if the industry can work. In my office, I have not taken a single leave since March 2020. I have not taken a single leave. I am traveling every day. My workers are traveling every day. All management is traveling every day. We are having Zoom meetings, but we meet physically also. We are taking the precautions. You are not going to fall into a well if you go back to the campus. So get back to the campus, tell them to open it. Jadavpur has been a leader. 20 years ago, I was there, and today, not 20, I think I was there around 25 years ago. So, I remember we forced them to prepone the exam, bring it forward. People generally tell them to postpone. We force them to bring it forward. We want to give it now, in 1 month. And they listened. In Jadavpur, student-teacher relationship is something that I have never seen anywhere. I have traveled many universities. I have never seen a relationship like this. So tell your teachers, tell your deans, tell your VC, sir, we need to get back. Industry is looking at us through a searchlight. The more semesters that we miss, lesser are our chances for a fair play later on in life. We cannot afford to miss the practicals. We cannot afford to miss the one-to-one interaction. So I think work from home is nice. It is an opportunity. Very good opportunity. Use it minimally. Our company gave the option of work from home to 1,500 employees, out of which only 6 employees opted for work from home.
Right.
Don't think that the others are afraid. The reason is there are problems in work from home. You will not, a food unit is supported by other units. There are creative units, there are IT sections, there are designing teams, there are R&D teams. So these are all supporting functions, the HR, the training. Now they can't work with work from home. Out of 1,500, only 6 employees opted for work from home. So work from home, although it looks very interesting, and the companies are thinking that yes, we'll be, saving office space, office rent, and power, everything now shifts to the employees. Employees have to take the call and tell them that no, we want to get back to office. The faster you get, better. Sir, I think this is what we are thinking now.
I think that's a very good way of setting the ball rolling. You did touch on some very good topics like R&D and green shoots, supply chain, rationalization of wages, etc., and R&D, and getting back to class. I have 2 questions for you, which you will perhaps come back on. First is, when you talk about rationalization of wages, there is an increasing theory and demand that primary producing nations, which is known as the South, and the manufacturing nations, which is actually comprising the North, and the debate in the international world is the North is exploiting the South because one has cost-based pricing and the other is based on demand supply. So they look like prices, but they are not the same animals, because the basis of pricing in agriculture is different from the basis of pricing in industry. So this can lead to exploitation of the southern countries, and that's why the disparity between the North and the South is increasing. Whereas that's true internationally, that's also partly true nationally, because you have the industrial belt going up at a galloping rate, where the raw material supplier, the labor supply, everything comes from agriculture. But they depend on the vagaries of nature, and their prices do not go up in the cost-based basis, cost plus profits, as it does for industry. So when you're talking about rationalization of wages, how would you look at what is the best bet farmers would have, the producers would have? It can't be Swaminathan's policy of cost plus a margin, because if the costs are too high and we take that as a base, then our products can't be sold in the international market. One of the reasons why we are not doing well. The second is, what are the other related agro businesses we can take up? It's like beekeeping, floriculture, horticulture, animal husbandry. What are the infrastructural growth we need? What is the capital extensive development we need? How do we digitalize the rural sector? How do we digitalize the informal sector? Without revenue, a state like West Bengal is doing so well in terms of better than average in terms of production, but we are not being able to contribute on GSTWA on the revenue returns. So if you want to have greater income coming from the sector, we'll have to digitalize this sector. And there's a great opportunity there where we formalize the informal sector. So these are the two questions I'd like to take you on with, and I'll keep a free hand for the next speaker. So from the left flank, gender bias, Mr. Amitav Sarkar, we now move on to Nabila Jamshed. And I happen to be an XLRI, and Jamshedpur has a special place for me. And I'm sure I'm looking at Nabila's talk on what she thinks about the topic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukherjee, and also the team at Jadavpur. It's always a pleasure to come back to the campus, and although it's virtual this time, I could not be more honored to join your panel today. So I'm going to actually take off from a point that Mr. Amitav Sarkar mentioned in the end, which is that we can't overplay the work from home hand, mainly because, and that draws to this larger idea of how narrowly sometimes we understand the impact of the disruption that we call COVID-19. Very often we keep our lens quite focused, quite laser focused on our everyday lives and how they have been impacted. So we talk about the new normal in the sense of, for example, telecommuting or working remotely or using video calling to do a lot of our collaboration and the opportunities that has presented us. To me, I think we can't overplay it because, as was very rightly mentioned, there are critical service sectors like agriculture, the production of our food, the running of our industries and supply chains that can't possibly be performed remotely. And therefore, that's not what we should be taking away from this pandemic. What we should be taking away instead are opportunities. So to bring the discussion then to the big picture, because I come to this from the policy perspective, the scale of the disruption this pandemic has caused, it's not comparable to me to small things like a small leap in technology that may have happened in our past, or a small recession that a country may have experienced previously, or even a natural disaster like a flood or a hurricane. To me, this is more akin to the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. And when I say that, I mean, this is the kind of disruption, the transformative change, the event horizon, at the end of which that'll give us new ways of doing things that we should really start thinking about now. So for example, when the Industrial Revolution happened, it was not just that we got the steam engine. It gave us the factory system of production. It raised, people's incomes across the economy. It gave us the middle class, and then it gave us problems with the factory system of production, and finally ended up giving us trade unions. That's the kind of ripple effect COVID is going to have. It's the kind of transformation affected by the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where for the first time ever, every country in the world got together and said all human beings, well, not every country, but the world got together and said every human being, irrespective of identity and affiliation, has human rights that are fundamental and inviolable, and that it is everyone's duty to protect. It's like the advent of artificial intelligence. And I come from the disarmament sector, so I'm also going to use the example of the advent of the WMD era. Because every time warfare changed a little, it was still the same. It was still two sides with analog weapons pointed at each other. And we had to rewrite the rules a little bit to accommodate, say, for example, when we leapt from the crossbow to the gun. However, when we created nuclear weapons or chemical weapons and biological weapons came into the picture, it completely changed the rules of the game the way COVID is going to. So for me, there are three things there are three big things that I hope that we'll also talk about in greater detail as we go through the panel, that I'm going to briefly touch on in my opening remarks, that to me are fundamentally going to look different in the world after COVID, not just for entrepreneurship and for supply chains, but for the way we conduct politics, for global governance, for the way that we think about sustainable development as the private sector as well as the public sector. The first of these is mainly caused by, so the reason why this disruption is so transformative isn't just because of the great losses we've suffered. So it's been, by any measure of the imagination, one of the biggest catastrophes or tragedies that humanity has collectively experienced, but also because of the fractures that we had in our societies that were exposed. So we went into this pandemic telling people that hand washing was a pandemic control strategy. And then we realized that billions of people around the world, by some estimates, 3 billion didn't actually have hand washing facilities or clean running water at home. We told people to shelter at home as a pandemic control strategy. And then you found that rates of domestic violence leaped up in many countries around the world because women were experiencing domestic violence by being locked down. And that wasn't because of COVID. It was just a fracture that was exposed by COVID. We found that while 2,500 billionaires had a rise in their income to the tune of $5.2 billion a day in some cases, we had almost 40% of the world's population didn't have social protections of any kind, or were lacking in these fundamental social protections that ultimately led to the loss of the equivalent of 225 million jobs. Those jobs were not lost because of COVID, but because of these fractures we had. By some estimates, 120 million more people are going to slip into poverty because of the socioeconomic impacts of this pandemic, because we didn't have those things in place. We were not doing development in a way that prioritizes those who are at the margins first. And so the first thing that's really going to change, and that must change, is that development needs to be reimagined. It can no longer just be about infrastructure. It needs to be about equity, justice, and resilience, and it needs to be built from the bottom up. There are two distinct ideas here. I say equity and justice because it needs to be more of a, like India has recently said, climate action can't just be mitigation. It can't just be a healthy carbon market where we can trade carbon credits. It needs to be about climate justice. We need to be looking at whose livelihoods will first get impacted when our coastlines are affected, or whose homes are going to be destroyed first by an extreme weather event. So that's about justice. And secondly, it's about resilience. And there are two reasons for this. One, resilience because the next time a global shock hits, and it will hit, as Dr. Mukherjee, in his opening remarks, he set the agenda for us to talk about climate action. And I think that's the big thing that we will be talking about immediately, once we embark on our recovery, is because the next shock is coming. It is going to be climate change. The sixth, assessment report of the IPCC that just came out a couple of weeks ago, it's again raised the alarm bell. We already knew it was coming, but it told us that if we go on to do business as usual, we are on track for a 1.5 degree temperature rise in the next few decades in our lifetimes. So the next time a global shock hits, what COVID has shown us is that it's not going to impact a particular country. It's not going to impact a particular class of people. It will impact everyone. So the poorest among us will be the first to lose our means of livelihood and homes and our opportunities and aspirations for life. Young people who are going to inherit a world that's much worse off, that we need to build vanguards now to protect them from. And of course, even the billionaires who earned so much money during the pandemic will eventually come within the fold of the next global shock. It could be another pandemic. It could be a WMD. The other thing that needs to change, and I think that's another lesson we are drawing from this pandemic, is how we operationalize solidarity. Despite people giving into their worst instincts and believing that the vaccine is implanting a microchip in all of us so that our lizard overlords can then sort of control us from space. We also saw that this was a time when healthcare really meant access to accurate information. Pandemic control meant that responsibility to safeguard society was devolved across the community. All of us, irrespective of what category of vulnerability we belong to, and we know everyone is vulnerable to COVID, but some more so. The immunocompromised, for example, the ones who already have pre-existing illnesses were more vulnerable. But that meant that all of us at all times wear a mask. It meant that all of us try to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. And is that the kind of responsibility we can devolve to individuals, communities, and neighborhoods for peace building, to do peacekeeping more effectively, to control hate speech and misinformation in our societies? And like I said, the way we think about the bottom line is going to change, and that's my final point. It's revealed to us, I think, this pandemic, that self-reliance is absolutely important. But it's also revealed to us that interdependence is just as important, which is what the Sustainable Development Agenda for 2030 is. It's the point that it's been trying to make for the last 5 years, and we have the decade of action ready to go. It is that we need to think not just how we make our enterprises and our countries self-reliant, but also how we are prepared to make up for the gaps the next time supply chains get disrupted. So the same way that India reached out and was able to help countries with critical medicines and vaccines and a lot of help with equipment and training, etc., when the pandemic broke out and supply chains were disrupted, we need to operationalize systems of global governance and bilateral and multilateral help that will help us do the same the next time this happens. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Mukherjee again and look forward to hearing the others.
Just when you're going to get a flurry of questions from me and some of the listeners, I was delighted to listen to you, Nabila, because when we were students in college and we were taught by Amartya Sen and Manmohan Singh in Delhi, we were talking about the theory of second West. If you didn't know, Amartya Sen started, although he's also from Jadavpur University, he was talking about the theory of the second West, which is equity and not just efficiency. And therefore, the most efficient society is not really the best society. It required the fair justice, the spread of wealth. And that's the same question that was echoed by JNU, Professor Ashok Guha, who said, what is the motive for growth? Why do we want growth if it's not mattering to the masses? But today, the disquiet has moved on to another platform, and that's the one that you're touching on. You're talking about Sustainable SDG 14, Sustainable Development Goals 14, which is life underwater. Why do we speak on that? Because if you're talking about peace, prosperity, and you'll have to consider natural disaster, you did consider this to be a natural disaster. How can you neglect India's coastline, which is 7.5 thousand kilometers? 9 out of 29 Indian states are on coast. We have 132 and 82 islands. We have 199 ports, where 2 of them can carry more than 14,000 tons. And we have 2 million square kilometers of economic zones where we have both living and non-living things. So if you really want to have inclusive growth, it must start with our coastline. It has to be with the blue economy. And the question from the audience is on the same line. One of them wants to know, what is your view of the necklace of diamonds as a UN peacekeeper? What's your take on the blue economy and the necklace of Ganga. What's the future for business and industry there? Enormous potential. And blue economy is an offshoot of green economy and slightly different from the ocean economy. You know that. So chew on these points and come back when I get back to you. But thank you for your presentation. And on that, we take on the next speaker. And I think I'll turn to Mr. Kostov Mitra, because he's just at that juncture coming in, because we are talking about maritime and we are talking about derivatives, we are talking about sales and marketing. And who could be better than Mr. Kostov Mitra to come in at this stage? Mr.
Hey,
Kostov
everyone.
Mitra, are you there? Thank you so much.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And thanks for all the great points that have been made by Nabila and Mr. Sarkar already. So I sort of went into the pandemic. So I've been like part of the digital workforce for a very long time. And I have lived in the world of technology for as long as I can remember. So for me, I think personally, what I saw March 2020, when the world was sort of shutting down, was like this two-speed world. In there is this one-speed world where companies which are very tech-driven are being able to move very fast and move into working from home mode without much of a consequence when it comes to how their whole technology stack is built, how their whole operations have been built, etc. And then you have the other side of the world where if you look at the hospitality business, if you look at the supply chain business, if you look at people who rely on physical presence to be able to do their jobs, that part completely shut down. So and you start to see like the divide that started cropping up, because if you are let's say if you're a musician, you work in theater, you work in films, you rely on being physically present, you can't really do much. On the other hand, if you are a software developer, you can move from where you were into your home, and you could still go on, continue to earn a livelihood. So I kind of saw this sort of firsthand, like how this two-speed world sort of operates. And we started our own startup right in the middle of the pandemic. So I was working at Revolut. And at that point in like July, August, we started our business working on Paradigm. And fast forward like 1 year, there are a few positives that I see and opportunities, but also there are negatives that we shouldn't forget. I think from a positive perspective, I think the pandemic is sort of a way, I think this disruption has leveled in some ways access. And what I mean by access is that before the pandemic happened, companies who would normally access a talent pool which is country specific, that sort of country specific talent pool access has been widened and democratized. As a result, if a large multinational wants to hire across the world, they can hire across the world, which means that talent also across the world, conversely, has access to these multinationals, which was not previously available. And I think that's a very important point because, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. We have someone in our team who works from Puebla in Mexico. And this is a person who didn't finish university. His laptop got stolen away from him at gunpoint, and he is in our team. And the thing is that he has access to us and we have access to him because of the pandemic. We have set up our systems in a way so that we can hire globally. Even as a 6-people company, we can hire globally. And that's what pandemic has allowed us, smaller companies, to have access to a global and diverse pool, which means also the talent pool has access to a diverse and larger company. which also means that you have you can be close to your parents, you can be close to your friends, you can be close to your family, and you still be do the best work that you can do. And I think that's what I mean by leveling the access. The second thing I think is that it has told us what do you mean by optionality? So right now, there are companies that are opening up. They're saying, okay, you can come to work, you may not come to work, and things like that. But I think what the pandemic has taught people is that you don't have to go to work for the sake of going to work. You can work from anywhere. What matters is whether you are happy doing what you are doing, not where you are doing what you are doing. The where component has become a flexible element, and the what becomes more important. And how you go about doing your work and what you do and how you do it is way more important than where you do it. And the third thing that I am I'm sort of seeing across the board is that this means that people can be flexible, and one has to develop trust, because you are no longer seeing the person next to you with whom you are interacting, with whom you are collaborating. It means a greater trust has to be developed between people in the process of building the economy, or building even in a very smaller scale. Let's see, if you're building your own startup. And I think these are very important shifts in the way we work, or in the future of work, because you have access, you have option, you have flexibility, and you have trust. All these things that were very non-existent before the pandemic. And this is like my third swan event. Like when I was at Jadavpur studying civil engineering, there was the dot-com crash. When 10 years later, then I had to go through the financial crash. And 10 years now, there is the pandemic. And who knows, 10 years from now, we have the climate change problem. So I think I've already gone through like 3 swan events. And all of these events at that point in time were considered black swan. Nobody saw it coming, but it always comes. And which brings me to another point I would like to make, is that I think sometimes we cannot take our what we have studied and what we have learned for granted. Things will change, and we have to always assume that things will change. Things might change. We have to grow a new muscle every 10 years. And if you don't grow that muscle, then you might not be able to be in a position where you are able to create enough value in the economy that you are actually part of. And this is something that I always tell people I come across, is that whatever we are doing and whatever we are learning today is not enough for tomorrow. We have to think like how we can be valuable to the economy. And some of you have already brought up certain points around it. If you are in a supply chain, and if you are reliant on a certain fleet of vehicles moving from A to B to be able to deliver your goods, and you have nobody being able to drive those vehicles, how do you distribute? How do you distribute your goods to your customers in that scenario? If you are relying on certain skills that you have learned over a period of time, and now the value of those skills are slowly diminishing, how do you provide for your family? How do you provide for everyone else that are around you, that are dependent on you? And I think everyone needs to sort of understand. I think the pandemic hopefully is telling people that you might have a set of core skills that allows you to be valuable in your own context, but that context can change, and it is always important to acquire adjacent skills as you kind of go along in life. You may never use it, but if a situation happens that you actually have to use it, you are at least better placed. I mean, we had someone who came across in our company as an intern, he was before working in a restaurant. And then we brought him over into the company. We taught him how to do web development. And then he went back because I'm in the UK. So we had the furlough scheme where government was providing 80% of their last earned salary. And there was no job for him. Yet he was getting 80% of his last earned salary. But because we were able to upskill him, he is now gone back and become a software developer who has effectively upskilled himself during the pandemic, so that he's now, the value he brings to the economy and the value the economy needs are at balance with each other. And I think this is the thing where we talk a lot of times about when it comes to the concept of equity and leveling the playing field. I think this is an opportunity for organizations to invest a part of their time in upskilling people around them and making them fit for the world that may not have materialized yet. And even at a company of our scale of 6 people, we do it day in and day out. We get we do internships with university students so that we teach them skills that the university doesn't teach them, because the university curriculum and the industry curriculum may not always be at sync with each other. And then companies should also be doing that, because then whoever is studying right now, you do an internship, you upskill yourself, you always keep yourself at lockstep with the changing world. So I would say that I am a hopeless optimist. As a result, I always look at the bright side of things, and I always try to find a solution to problems. And for me, from my perspective, I think what I saw from COVID is a knee-jerk reaction that told a lot of people that you need to do more. You cannot just rely on the past to be the flag bearer of the future. You need to add something more to you need to add something more. You have to add your own secret spice to your food to make it palatable for the future. So that's from my side.
Yeah. You remind me of Albert Camus' myth of Sisyphus, who's pushing up the boulder to the top of the hill, but it keeps falling down, but he still struggles because life is all about hope. And you come out very clearly on that. Life is what you call is a hopeless optimist, but I think that's a very noble stand to take rather than be suicidal in your attempt and give up. Four very interesting points you said. One is access. That has improved. Where you are does not matter. What you're doing is more important. And the element of trust is coming. Now, on these 4 elements, and there was a question, how do you distribute? Perhaps I'll try to venture a reply to that later, but not now. I'd like to chew on 2 points. First, access to whom? In the digital divide, there are many who are like fallen leaves falling behind. The example you gave was England, where people are getting 80% of their last salary. In India, they're not getting even 8% of whatever salary they earn. So there's starvation deaths here. So the question,
I think Dr. Mukherjee has some problem with his internet. So till then, till he joins back, Gargidi, could you take a few questions? I'll just contact Dr. Mukherjee to join back.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any questions for the panelists available? Then I would be happy to ask them.
Kargidi has sent the question.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So firstly, we had the question for Nabila ma'am. Ma'am, would you like to go ahead with your question first? The question being that as we were speaking about a blue economy for India, what is your view about diamond necklace of diamonds being from your view as a UN peacekeeper?
So I can see Dr. Mukherjee is back. Would you like me to answer now, or we can go ahead with the panel first?
Let me just check in with sir once. Dr. Mukherjee, can you hear us? You're on mute. Can someone please unmute?
Okay, let me see that.
Sir, you're back.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, sir, loud and
Then
clear.
my question to Mr. Mitra was two. How do you take care of the ones which are falling behind in the digital divide? And secondly, why should the richer countries preach to the poorer ones, please get your act together, when they themselves polluted the world and they are now preaching, having advanced to a certain stage, get your act together? I mean, what is your take on that? And that's a question which comes from the audience. My next speaker on today's menu is Anisha Bhattacharya, and she would be talking about healthcare and psychology. Is Anisha there, please? Can we hear you? And the
Yes, am I
final speaker
audible,
will,
sir?
yeah, Anisha, that's you.
Hello, everyone. So I fortunately or unfortunately have a scope of seeing things through the microsystem lens, like the microsystem lens of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model. And one comment that I really found fascinating was by one of my favorite authors, Arundhati Roy. She said that the pandemic is a portal from one world to the next. And I really believe so. The world that we are going to embark upon post this pandemic is not really going to be the world that we were living in before this pandemic. And I was really fascinated by some of the points put forward by my co-panelist, Nabila Jamshid. And thank you for your points, because you have the scope of seeing things on a macro level, whereas I am a person who works more on a one-to-one basis with either students or my clients whom I meet in psychotherapy or counseling. So some things that I'm noticing is, and this is something that might have impacted all of us, because none of us are, immune to psychological conditions. That this whole condition of uncertainty and unpredictability, because we had a lot of predictions, anticipations, and we all know that none of those anticipations and predictions, like as they say, God disposes all our plans. Man proposes, God disposes. So we have seen this uncertainty and unpredictability really affect the mental health of individuals. So the first thing that we have noticed is there has been an exacerbation of already existing psychological conditions. So the people who were really already suffering from a psychological condition, their conditions have aggravated due to this pandemic. And two conditions which have really become very prevalent during this time and age is one, depression, which according to a recent study is going to be the next pandemic, so to say, and anxiety spectrum disorders. Like, as we can understand, because anxiety is something which is always triggered by uncertainty and unpredictability. And though we know that, the future is unpredictable, in our own ways, we try to find some certainty and some direction to life. So that's the reason we have calendars. That's the reason we make schedules. We make schedules for the next day, for the next month. We make travel plans. Now, all of that has taken a hit during this pandemic, and that has also really impacted people. And very honestly speaking, I would say these are indirect consequences of COVID-19 rather than COVID-19 directly. Like, if we see, then we would say that, it's not really an impact of COVID-19, the pandemic. What I'm trying to say is, it's not that a person who has been affected by COVID-19 virus is going to be developing mental health conditions. It's more due to this pandemic and the resultant lockdown situation that has led to the psychological conditions. So as Nabila was also pointing out, like there has been rise in the cases of domestic violence, or probably those are being reported now. Those were things which were under reported and suppressed. Now they are just coming out in light. And apart from that, there has been a rise in cases of abuse also, especially child abuse, child sexual abuse. Apart from that, as I mentioned, depression, anxiety spectrum disorders have seen a huge rise. And because of lack of mobility, deprivation of interpersonal space, because what I'm again seeing is, especially in the young population, in the age range between 21 to 35, a lot of people are being compelled to go back to their hometowns, home cities, live with their parents, live with their family. And it would be a misassumption to say that all of them were really happy with their parents or their family before the pandemic. So they have been compelled or obligated to go back to a home or family environment, which was probably psychologically toxic or abusive to start with. And now they're having to stay with them and also continue with their work from that environment. So that again is adding to a lot of psychological stress and distress for sure. So these are the things that we are seeing. But again, though I'm a realist, I'm not an optimist like my co-panelist, Mr. Hostav Mitro. Though on a positive note, I would say one good thing coming out of this is the stigma associated with mental health problems, the stigma associated with psychological disorders, I would say is somehow reducing. Now, people are coming more into the light. They are trying to address their problems. They are acknowledging that they have mental health issues and they are seeking help. Though again, we know that the suicide rates have gone up. Again, I think that is more because of the consequence of COVID-19 and this pandemic situation rather than COVID-19 directly. And that's why I would say there have been a lot of change in the way the mental health services used to cater to individuals also. Like as the Gustav Mitro, my panelist, had pointed out, the way we as mental health professionals are functioning has also changed. Like earlier, even if you ask me as a consultant clinical psychologist, I was far more comfortable in the in-person mode, in the physical mode of doing therapy or counseling rather than doing it over the virtual platform. But now we know that a lot of startups, a lot of organizations all over India and I think all over the world have come up who are providing virtual services, virtual counseling, psychotherapy, and also low cost psychological services. As Mr. Mukherjee had pointed out, that another problem, especially with countries like India, is the income has gone down. People have lost their jobs. There has been a high rate of unemployment. So going by that, another concern is counseling or psychotherapy. Again, you need to pay for the fees. You need to pay for the consultation fees. You need to pay for the sessions. So another good thing, I would say, another positive thing after this pandemic is a lot of free psychological services have become available. A lot of them have been spearheaded by even educational institutions where psychology trainees are working, mental health trainees are working, and they have started providing these services free of cost, which is a relief in a country like ours where people really cannot afford therapy. Though yes, consultation fees are not as costly as it is in United Kingdom or USA, but still it is costly in a country like ours. So that is again a positive effect of COVID-19, I would say.
Yeah, that's very brief but very wonderfully put. I have two questions. One is, if I look at Piaget's cognitive thinking, you're talking about from the formal, pre-operational to concrete forms, and your suggestions have been on that line. And we can also bring in the bark. How do we get out of this? Either the visual, the auditory, the reading habits, or kinesthetic, doing exercises. But my question is from an Indian perspective, to get out of these traumas, psychological traumas, how much can the metaphysical internal journey, meditation for that matter, help? Does it really help us to get out of it, or should it be resorted to? The second question, which actually has been echoed by somebody in the panel, is what steps should the doctor fraternity take to see that this mental uplift takes place? Because it's very difficult for us to tell a person, let's go to a psychoanalyst because you are suffering from depression. And as people are sensitive enough to feel that you're actually talking him into it. So how do we tackle this issue of really facing it? How important is the metaphysical journey in this entire purpose, where everything is actually physical and it anyway undergoes a change with age? So even if COVID didn't hit us, age would have. So you more or less mature faster than you needed to with such a shakeup. So that's going to be my question, and you can answer that on the return journey. I now turn to the next one who comes with a name called Prakash. So he's going to give us a greater exposure, and he's a Sharma to add to that. So Mr. Prakash Sharma on the today's topic, please.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. And I was listening intently to all the esteemed panelists talk. I work as a behavioral strategist. I have this company called 1001 Stories, and we work to create better brands, better products, better people using behavioral science. And given the larger context, I thought, let me talk about two of my clients today. One which folded up during the pandemic, and the other who actually boomed and possibly can become a unicorn in the same time, right? And that was what my talk was. But I also had the good fortune of listening to Nabila, and I decided I'm going to scrap that because I can't talk about it anymore. So what I want to talk about instead is the reality that when a COVID breaks out, one of our biggest challenges is how do you get people to wear masks? How do you get people to wash their hands? You just get people to wear masks, wash your hands, boom, the pandemic is gone. That's it. All it takes is 30 days. That's when people who understand behavioral science come into picture, and then you look at the whole story and you say, you know what, people don't know how to wash hands. We put the soap, we are done, 3 seconds. You need to wash it for 20 seconds, and we don't understand time. One of the precepts of behavioral science. So you crack a solution which says, get people to sing happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, right? And you go on till the end, and you hit 20 seconds by the time happy birthday to you is done. That is the amount of time you need to wash your hands to actually make the hand wash effective. So that's a fantastic solution, right? And you get very happy saying, this can be a good behavioral solution to get people to wash their hands and you can get them to fight COVID. But in the reality is almost 3 to 5 billion people on this planet do not actually have access to hand wash. Another problem is, you have your peers, your colleagues, and people who have been impacted by the shutdown. They go on saying, if only you could get people to, order through a Dunzo, through a Swiggy, through a Zomato, and all those food delivery apps or grocery delivery apps, people all stay home during lockdowns. The pandemic is sorted, right? So you can look at it from a behavioral angle. How do you make these products more effective, more easy to use, make it easy to search, use technology, and boom, the pandemic is solved. But on the other hand, you have the good fortune of speaking to a butcher named John. And he tells you, sir, the market is going down, economy is going down. And your counterpoint is, but it's almost 50,000 in the Bombay Stock Exchange. Look at the Sensex. And he says, that might be the case, but I know. And then you ask him, tell me, John, how do you know? And John will then tell you, sir, I have a lot of Swiggy orders, a lot of Zomato orders. What I don't have is the Chutta Kula Paisa orders. And I say, explain to me what it means. And he says, a daily laborer earns daily, spends daily. He comes to you with cash. He earns $100, $30 is his chicken. $40 is his chicken, right? When he's feeling the need to indulge. So I have the order of 1 kg, 2 kg going up, and they all come online. But my orders of that 200 gram, 400 gram, that guy who's with more small change, that is dried up. And that is how I know the economy is suffering, right? So in this larger world, I don't even know what to say about the impact of pandemic. I feel awkward because I know I come from a privileged background, AC, Zoom, internet, good institutions. So let me talk about human behavior larger, and I'll leave it at that. Behavior, if you look at it, we are a product of almost 500,000 to 1 billion years of evolution. And that is how our bias and heuristics have been coded into us. We love something that is for free. You can't help it. You love something that's for free. If you don't know when something is coming to you, the ambiguity affects you. If I give you a reward all the time, you start disliking the reward. I have to give the reward sometimes, withhold it from you sometimes. These are human behavior, right? The pandemic is not going to change any of those things. This has been hardwired into us. This is evolutionary biology. Nothing's going to change out there. These will remain the same. Second part of behavior comes from our habits. And now, if you look at the pandemic, what it has done is you can look at it from 2 points of view, right? One is, Kostov and me, we realize gyms are closed. You want to get fit. You want to pick up workout at home. You start working out. Maybe we are not working at home, right? You start changing your habits. Those of us who have got kids, you realize your kids cannot study on their own on Zoom. You start teaching them if you are not. Slowly, the pandemic changes your habits. This is the first time in 80, 90 years, husbands and wives are having lunch together on weekdays. Many of them, lunch was a Saturday, Sunday affair. You would have your lunch in your offices. So these habits are changing, right? These habits can go back once the pandemic is over. There is no reason for them to continue. On the other hand, there are people who were not using Swiggy or a food delivery app. And now, because your restaurants are closed, your shops are closed, you adopted that. People who used to travel for business meetings and they adopted Zoom, for a conference, that can continue post the pandemic also. These habits, right? Some habits we will stop, we'll revert back to what we were doing. Some will continue. And it is in this phase of what is going to stop and what is going to continue that the entrepreneurs have that ability to say, you know what, here is where a nice business model can be cracked. So this is one side of it, right? So we looked at bias and heuristics, we look at habits. Third part is the larger context, or what you can call system. To use a very lazy, high-level vague word. When a system goes through a collective shock like this, right, there are certain things system learns, certain things system unlearns. One of the things the system begins to understand, and this is, see, one was hard-coded, second is me as an individual. System is all of us here, right? We are around 16 of us out here. This is the system. System decides certain things together, that certain things are possible. For example, mental health. Nobody in this country talks about mental health. It's a stigma. Now the system has decided mental health is something you must talk about. It has been a change coming for quite some time with Bollywood stars like Deepika Padukone all speaking about. But the pandemic, the work from home, the super stress, all of it makes it easy for us to talk about it. Right? There are going to be certain changes happening at a system level. Online learning was, people almost look at it and say, I think it's a fraud. Today, online learning is how you have new startups becoming unicorns, billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar valuation. That's because we as a system decided there is a possibility out. And I want to leave us with that. Behavior, the three aspects of it, what is going to revert, what is not, and what is the system going to do. Do I know the answers? I don't, frankly. It's too early to be allocated and say, this is exactly what's going to happen. That is wrong. There are too many second orders effect at play out here. I heard, we're talking about, I'll just touch on the last thing for a minute. We're talking about salaries in certain places. And they should go up. Definitely, they should go up. You need to have better salaries. However, in a particular place, if the salary of, I'm just taking a story out here, right? Indulge me for a moment. If you have the salaries of a certain sect of workers going high up, what it means is they are the ones who are able to afford, better things. In turns, what this means is when they go out seeking rent, the landlord says, well, this guy makes 80,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakh. Let me hike my rent from 10,000 to 15,000 because he can afford it, which is good for the landlord too, right? And this guy can pay. The problem is the landlord beside him, Mr. Bandopadhyay, Mr. Chatterjee, whoever it is, he looks and says, if he's getting 15,000, why am I getting 10,000? So now he wants to hike his rent too. But the other guy who's coming to him for a rent, is he making 2.5 lakh too, right? So that system shock, second order effects, what kind of effects are going to be there? This is just a small case. Larger stories, I don't know. This is too big a country, too complex a scene. We can talk and speculate, and I would like to listen and understand your point of view out here. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, a couple of questions for you too. One is in economics, we have the demonstration effect, which is the ratchet effect. Once you put up a standard, it's very difficult for you to bring it down. And your behavior is determined not by what you want, but what you see others do. So in a country like India, where you suffer from dualism, you have actually two economies in one. Habits are different from the city and the rural areas. Technology is different. Financial deepening is different. Cultural moorings are different. Your social behavior is different. So how do you change a habit? As someone said, it's a very difficult word having 5 letters. Even if you take away H, a bit of it remains. So how do you change your habit? And systems for whom? Which society? We are talking about the society that can articulate online. But how do we spread this message for, let's say, 80% of the population? And they are the doers. So I'd like your take on how do you make this movement total? And of course, in England, we have a course in most of the schools saying analyzing self, where you try to use behavioral sciences, starting from Carl Jung's color scheme to something very modern. What kind of a person are you? How important is this for us to tell our people to get to recognize, not by imitating others or chasing the same kind of schools and colleges, getting to know and chasing their dreams depending on getting to analyze themselves. And of course, analyzing the organizations to see that you have a goodness of fit, the right man gets into the right job. So these questions can perhaps be something we toy with. Very fast, 10 minutes. Strictly, I'm using the sledgehammer now. We go back to the first speaker, Amitav Sarkar. You have questions were already there. So if you want to say a few more lines, please come here. Amitav Sarkar, please. 2 minutes for you.
Okay, no problem. Sir, you asked two things. One is about rationalization of wages and the demand supply part, the industrial user versus the cost-based agri producer. Now, the solution is there. Solution is not very difficult to understand. First is go local, produce what is needed nearby. Go digital and technical is another point. You don't have to, look at your panchang to decide this year's crops. Rather, you go for AccuWeather and the other websites that gives you accurate metrics about how it is going to be this year, and create newer markets. This, how you can do is, you rationalize your produce. Suppose I am doing rice, and because of overproduction, the prices of rice is going down and down. There is always an option to switch over, bring down the produce of that commodity from the agri point of view, and you will see that slowly and steadily the farmer is not that strongly hit. And do not overproduce also. This year, the prices of onions went up to 100 rupees. So next year, everybody jumps into the bandwagon and starts producing more onions. Next year, there's going to be a bumper crop. Prices are going to come down. And learn from your mistakes. If you did a mistake in your crop rotation policy or your selling process, try and correct it. And there is nothing in the farm to fork model that is against the producers. So remove the fear, because I'll tell you, there's a common fear that is coming up, is that the corporates are going to take over. They're going to, give dictations on what is going to be made and what will be the price, and they're going to exploit the farmers. This is absolutely rubbish, because in corporate sector, there is fierce competition.
Competition.
Very
That's
fierce competition. We are fighting against another corporate. He is fighting against another corporate. You have the chance to sell to X, Y, Z. Earlier, you didn't have that. So farm laws, if you really look at it from the farmer's point of view, is more, or I would say the better option for you than what you are having now. Corporate cannot kill you. Corporate couldn't kill anybody. Think of the technocrats. Think of the IT sector. Corporate never killed them. There's another question is wages. Mr. Prakash said that somebody's wages become high. It takes, he increases the rent, and then when the other guy has the capacity to give that rent. Answer is simple. When we talk about rationalization of wages, we talk about the entire rainbow. We talk about the entire gamut of these people working here. So it's not about one set or one type of workers. Rationalization, what is implied is, if for the same job you are getting so much in this part of the country, in another part of the country for the same job, the wages should be somewhere near about. Only then this one India plan, because you know our services are slowly becoming centralized. One ration card, one type of mobile connection, one type of systematic approach to wages. So wages should also have the concept of one nation, one policy, one rate for a certain. So the IT guy will always earn more than the daily wager, but the daily wager of Delhi and the daily wager of Kharagpur should, even if they don't earn the same, they should at least see some parity among them. And your second, I have to finish it fast. Your second question was, what are the related agro-business that we can look into? First thing is how to increase the income. So don't look at the traditional crops. Go for floriculture. In fruits, India has such a huge production. 40% goes to wastage every year. So bring in cold chain. Fish and prawn culture. Prawn is something that is traded the most in the international community. When we make prawns, we make a mess out of it. We add chemicals and we add pesticides, and then products are returned, and then you earn a bad name. So take the help of technology, digitalize your outputs. Cold chain, fish processing, prawn culture, and fruit production are the new things. And floriculture, of course. I was talking to APIDA chairman, and he told me that, do you know that from Mallighat in Kolkata, we are sending flowers to Amsterdam? I said, sir, frankly speaking, I never knew this. He said, no, we are doing it. And even one rose stick is earning 100 rupees for that guy. So that is something that I think this is the silver lining of the entire thing that we learned. Go for markets that value you. Don't think of only traditional aspects, change.
We need you for a full seminar on agricultural development, and I'll invite Jadavpur to invite you and me to take this matter on. And I'm so happy with what you mentioned about the farmer's law. I agree with you entirely.
Yes, sir.
Nabila Jamshed, please, if we can have her on.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to combine both the questions that were posed to me on the blue economy, as well as the link between the ocean economy and islands and peace. Just by, first stating the caveat that I think the fact that our conflicts are linked to resources, it's often in the public discourse pitched as if it's going to be a new thing. We keep hearing the future of war is water, but I think we are mistaken. I think as a student of the history of warfare, I think war has always been about resources. I mean, as far as World War I wasn't caused by, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It was caused a lot, of a lot of political factors, one of which was imperial rivalry over resources. Water, I think I'm going to combine both of those questions into the critical importance of water and economies that depend on water in our future, both in terms of building the resilience of our economies in the future, but also building the defenses of peace. The economies, because I think one of the reasons why the blue economy has been so late coming into the public discourse is because we keep thinking of it as being somehow on the peripheries of climate action. So you have the green economy and you have the planet, and then the blue economy is a small part. But even in a country like India, 4% of our GDP is linked to the global economy, and around the world, I mean, an incredible amount of most of our transport and our global supply chains are really linked with the oceans and with waterways. And I think the example of the Suez Canal getting blocked a couple of months ago is a great example of how much we depend on even a small a narrow neck of water, which getting blocked can really impact livelihoods and supply chains and industries and national economies around the world. As far as peace building is concerned, again, we need to look at water, and I'm not just talking about the ocean economy here. I'm talking about climate change induced water scarcity that's going to trigger so many civil and international conflicts of the future. I mean, in 2019, for example, in Mali, the Red Cross told us that grazing land, because it had become scarce, so pastoralists, didn't want to travel too far because they were afraid of armed groups. So they came near those water sources and then came directly into conflict with fishermen. And that's just one small example of how, and we know how prolific the conflict in Mali has been and how many countries it has impacted. So that's just one example of this. So going ahead, I think we spoke at length about water as a basic service that helps us combat the COVID-19 pandemic and other, it really unlocks developmental opportunities for people. But I think the focus on water really needs to be the big priority for national economies and for the international system going forward. And like you rightly said, Dr. Mukherjee, the COP has signaled that, and climate leaders like India have signaled that. And hopefully COP26, we see more of a vibrant discussion on the blue economy and how we can operationalize international governance around it.
I think I'll ask Jadavpur to make seminars on each of these topics, as we haven't heard enough of you. And Nabila, it's been a pleasure to hear you. So, Kaustav, another additional question to the one that I've asked you. The question is, what happens to the aviation department in this situation? Right.
Oh.
Kaustav, are you ready, please?
Yeah, I'm ready. So just, I think I have 2 minutes, so I think I'll be brief and quick. So in terms of the access question and to whom, you are right to mention that there is a growing digital divide where people who have better access to technology are at a significant advantage compared to people who actually don't have it. And I think, but on the flip side as well, any statistics we look at, I mean, India is probably one of the front runners when it comes to technology penetration, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural. And as technology penetration grows in India, a lot of larger companies are investing a lot in terms of increasing, let's say, Wi-Fi access in railway stations, or increasing releasing light versions of their applications, mobile applications, so that it can work in low bandwidth areas. So even though I think the digital divide is going to reduce over the years, but my main worry is that it reduces and it stabilizes and stagnates at a particular level. And that's the point that we need to be worried about, is that it keeps coming down, penetration keeps increasing, and then it asymptotes and at a level, and then you have a section of the community that is permanently cut out. And that's something that I think it's up to the policymakers to kind of make sure that that's something that doesn't happen. On the question of trust and why should richer countries tell poorer, I think people can tell what they want to tell. You don't have to listen. So it's a very straightforward answer there, that everyone has the right to speak as much as everyone has the right to listen, and everyone has the right to make their own opinion. So I think the answer from my opinion on that piece is pretty clear. Aviation, yes, it's a very very important topic. I think you've brought up. I think aviation over the years has been a technology that has helped people move across borders. But it's also over the years, I've worked in that industry for about 6-7 years, and when we were at Airbus, we would constantly think about how we can reduce our fuel footprint, etc. I personally think that as time progresses and we are getting out of the COVID era, traveling and aviation is probably going to come back, going to make a comeback. But what I think is already starting to happen, and this is something that should happen over the next years, is the significant amount of dollars that are being invested into aviation where the fuel is not oil. There are already quite a few startups that are trying to figure out a solution to fly an aircraft using less oil and more hydrogen fuel and things like that. I always tend to take a very tech perspective to things. That's something I understand probably the best. But I do see a lot of innovation happening in that area. Aircrafts in general have become more fuel efficient over the years, but there is a lot that can be done, definitely. In terms of the global demand for travel, it's already starting to increase, but what needs to happen is the infrastructure at airports needs to improve. It's nothing to do with the flights. The flights are fine. The point is, how do you have effective policies and accurate and faster ways of measurements at the airport? If you can make that happen, there is nothing that is nothing structurally wrong with the act of flying from A to B.
Yeah, thank you so much. But I think the question had a underlining point that airfares have become costlier, and there is this cattle class and the business class, and how safe is it to go in the cattle class, and how beyond your reach is the business class. But that's not the question we're going to take up now. We'll just go to Anisha. We are really running out of time. Anisha, it's your question on the metaphysics, please.
Yes. So to answer your question on the metaphysical aspect, so I would try to bifurcate the question into two. So one is how metaphysics can play a role in our daily lives, like how the metaphysical aspect of meditation, yoga, relaxation practices, that can actually have a positive impact on our daily life. And we are seeing that, like we suggest clients to and patients to engage in meditative practices, deep breathing exercises, relaxation exercises, because of course that helps in reducing the level of daily stress and anxiety that they experience. And on a larger scale, like the existential perspective, like as we know, there is this third wave of behavior therapy, which is the most prevalent all over the world now. Those are the mindfulness practices or mindfulness based psychotherapy and and commitment based psychotherapy. So this whole module of therapy, what it tries to say is, one, live in the present moment with non-judgmental awareness, and secondly, having a level of acceptance towards the things which are beyond our control. For instance, life is unpredictable. We do not know what is happening tomorrow. So just having that level of acceptance, number one, and being present in the present moment, because that is all we know for sure. That is all we can focus on and work on. So that can really help. And those are the modes of therapy which are becoming more and more prevalent, not only because of COVID-19, but probably for the last 2-3 decades, so to say. And now it is becoming more and more prevalent because we have started to realize that. And in fact, I think the economists in this panel would agree that in this age and this time that we are going through, we are also seeing a lot of the youngsters taking risks all of a sudden. So I think they're starting to see their life in a different perspective because of COVID-19 and the kind of impact it has had on their lives. What I mean to say is, what I have seen in as an impact of COVID-19 is a lot of people have left their jobs voluntarily and have plunged into something that they had been dreaming of doing for quite a while. That they have started a startup, they have started a business, they have started a non-governmental organization, maybe. They have really delved or plunged into, they have taken the leap of faith that they probably would have kept as a retirement program, post-retirement program, and they have delved into it considering the uncertainty of life. And to answer your second question, sir, that what steps should the doctor fraternity take? So the first thing that we have to keep in mind is doctors are also part of our society. They are also as stigmatized and as prone, as vulnerable to mental health illnesses as we are. In fact, I think you must be aware that there was this recent news that came through that a psychiatrist had committed suicide, and it created a lot of upheaval across the mental health fraternity. That and people were stigmatizing that also, that how could a psychiatrist commit suicide? The person should know that suicide is not the solution. So the first thing that we have got to focus on when it comes to the doctor fraternities, they also have to be psychoeducated. They also have to be made aware of the prevalence of psychological illnesses and conditions. So that's the first step forward. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. I think your takeaway is the one prophetic statement. It's fortunate to be present in the present moment, and we are lucky that we are. Last but not least, Prakash, come again and please also advise us. How do we change the system?
Thank you, Ed. You scare me. There's too much of pressure.
Yeah.
I don't know how to change the system.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let me go back to your question, though. And I mean when I say I don't know how to change the system, but I can at least talk about it. Yeah. So let me talk and see.
Yeah, I want you to talk about it. I'm not asking you to give a solution.
Thank you. So if you look at habits or the things that we do, and we turn the lens on us, you can look at habits which are individual, which I do for myself, I, Prakash, do for myself, and which are habits which I have because I live in society. An example is I could wake up every morning, go for a jog, I could go for a boxing, whatever it is, right? I do it for me. Second habit is every time I'm on the street, I want to spit on the road. And it's a very natural thing to want to spit. I mean, it's a bodily function. I hold myself back and say, I'm not going to spit. So these two are different kind of habits. You can take Prakash from here, put him anywhere in the world. If Prakash is the kind of guy who likes to go out for a jog and run, he will go. If he doesn't like it, he will not go. There are some caveats here. You can, but more or less, Prakash remains the same because he's doing it for himself, right? So these habits, they have a different genesis. Why we do them, why we don't do them. It's primarily coming from intrinsic motivation of what you want to do. And then there are techniques around how do you make Prakash, if he wants to run, go from 0 to walking 5 meters, to 5 minutes, to 10 minutes, to 30 minutes, to making him jog over a period of time. There are fantastic behavioral science application, and you can do that, right? And so that is one side of it. But Prakash spitting or not spitting on the road, you can take him straight and put him in Singapore, and he'll stop it right there. Now the difference is out here, I'm in a context where I'm aware of societal expectations. I'm not supposed to spit on the road. I'm not supposed to throw garbage on the road. So as human beings, while our internal motivations are the main driver for habits that we do for ourselves, when it comes to society's expectations. You do not get off a girl child married because society expects you not to. We got the girl child married at the age of 10 and 12 because society then expected us to do it. We are always responding to what society wants us to do. This is what you call social norms, in the philosophy, right? A better way of bringing change is straight up hardcore law. Put up a law. I'll take a minute this one. The law is the best way of ensuring a change or a new habit comes. You put up a law, you cannot do it. You must wear the helmet. It's a law. You have to comply, right? So laws are very powerful, but we cannot have a law for everything. That's where social norms come into the picture. The question now is, how do you develop this expectation of society to us? How do I tell Prakash, society expects you not to spit? Now that is again what takes time. It cannot be sudden. It cannot appear from zero. But the good thing here is a small group of committed people like yourself out here, right? If you consistently talk about it, get people to understand about it, that is all it takes. It doesn't take a huge number of people to bring about the change. And the tiny spark through network effects, it can build a larger conversation, and you can have that expectancy set in, which is how we have in this country been able to bring down the rate of child marriage and many other social levels. And I think this is how I can answer both your questions. And I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said, because I remember Singapore about good 70 years ago was as dirty as any Indian city. But over time, it's become a spotless city, and because of the system and because of the fines, it's called the fine city. And they've been able to do it. But the difference is actually educating the people who are to actually execute the rules and conduct the fines. I mean, we have the similar rules in India on paper, but you see a cabwala just opening the door and spitting his pan bahar on the road and leaving his mark. Or for that matter, if you go with the two-wheelers, you know, it's a pride for people not to wear the helmets. So how do you change the habits if you don't make the law enforcers change their way of looking at laws? But I think what Jadavpur should take pride on, and I'm happy to see this, we still lead as a country, as a university, which perhaps compares with the best in the world. If you can hold discussions like this, and if you have youth listening to discussions like this, I'm convinced that Jadavpur is where Jadavpur was, and I'd like to see the flag flying higher. And on behalf of the panelists, let me ask the young batch that has organized this cell and this talk a very good evening. And on behalf of us, thank you for bearing us for exactly 2 hours. Thank you so much. No?
That was a very insightful session. It was great to know about the consequences of the ongoing pandemic from so many different perspectives. Thank you, Shumon sir, Amitav sir, Prakash sir, Anvesha ma'am, Nabila ma'am, and Kaustav sir for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this session and share valuable knowledge from your fields of expertise. So that is it for today's session, everyone. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Meet you all again on 24th September. Prakhar Gupta will be joining us for that session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Thank you. Thank you.